Alright, here we go. Alright, lecture's going to be kind of short today. Alright, lecture's going to be pretty short. All I want to do today, what we just got through going over principles is basically how to use a lot of the commands and all that kind of stuff. Now we're fixing to get in more or less of how to really start getting into larger drawings. That's going to be to a larger or different scale than the one-to-one we've been messing with. And we're also going to get into how you put different drawings in the same file that may be to different scales. You may have a 1/4 inch equals a foot as an architectural scale as a floor plan, and you may have a 3/4 inch equals a foot detail on the same sheet of paper. So you're going to learn how to put all that together, what different settings you got to go through to accomplish that, and so forth. Because once you get in and start messing with scales, it starts messing with everything: your text size, your dimension style, your title block, the size of it, every bit of that. Okay? So let's start. Now, one thing I'm going to go over today, we're going to do a simple drawing at first, just to get used to scaling and so forth. What we're going to go over today is how would you do a metric drawing. Okay, we do them in fundamentals of drafting, but how would you do a metric drawing in CAD? All right, first thing you got to know, for one, is what is the scale for a metric compared to a standard? The metric scale basically is 1 inch equals 25.4. Okay, so 1 inch equals 25.4. You're going to need to know that. 1 inch equals 25.4. Which means this is going to get larger. Okay? When we were drawing in CAD and principles, if you had a 1 inch line, you typed in what? 1 inch, right? And it was in decimal, correct? Metric's going to be the same way. You're going to stay in decimal. Except now, when you go to type in 1 inch, you're going to type in 25. Okay? That's a lot bigger line than a single 1, right? So that's what I'm talking about. Now, they ain't going to tell you, okay, this is 1 inch, now transfer to metric. They're going to give you the metric dimension. So, first off, I'm going to go ahead and draw in your title block. Okay? You can do this different ways. Some people goes in and just starts drawing their object and then puts their title block in later. Or you can go ahead and put your title block in now and do what you have to and then start your object. So either way. But I'm going to go ahead and show you. I'm going to go ahead and draw my rectangle. Okay, and same thing. Let's see, my dimensions are 11 by 8.5. Offset at n 0.25. Exploded, offset up 0.375. Alright, that's just so we'll have our representation of our title block. Now, the only problem is, if you go in and start drawing in metric, will it fit inside this title block? No. So, what you have to do, remember that scale we went over? And I said it's going to come into play once we start at intermediate? This is where your scale is going to come into play. So, Home tab, Modify Panel Scale, or SC on the keyboard. Select your object. Right click to continue, select your base point. I want it to be 0, 0. Now, when you're dealing with scales, you're going to have to scale. Now listen very carefully. You might want to put an asterisk, put bold letters when I say this. When you're dealing with scales, scale your title block, not your object. Say it again. Scale your title block, not your object. A lot of people will come in here and try to scale their object, which then throws it completely off. Scale your title block. Alright, when you have to scale your title block, you want to scale it by your scale factor. And that's what today's lesson is going to be on. How do you figure scale factor? How do you figure line type scale? How do you figure text height when it comes to a different scale? Okay? Now, I'll go ahead and tell you because the scale factor of metric is 25.4. So you might want to make a note of that. The scale factor for a metric drawing is 25.4. So when you scale your title block up, you scale it by the scale factor. So type in 25.4 and enter as. And if you want to see the full title block, you can either hit Z spacebar or E spacebar, or just double click your wheel on your mouse very quickly. So now your title block is ready to draw a metric drawing inside of it. Okay? But what if what if we were dealing with an architectural scale? Alright, so let's talk. We just talked about metric. Metric, the scale factor is 25.4. But what if we're going to do a scale of some type of architecture? Architectural scales are, they look like this. Okay? Or they could look like, they could say 1 inch equals 1 foot. They could say 3 inches equals 1 foot. Or it could say something like 3/16 inch equals 1 foot. If it has 1 foot on the end, it's an architectural scale. Okay? Now, there's three things I want to show you. Scale factor, LTS, do y'all remember what LTS stands for? Line type scale, and then you have text. Okay? So let's start out at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. How do I figure out what its scale factor is? What you do, you take this fraction right here, or you always take the number that's in front. So in this case, it's 1/4. You take that fraction, you flip it. Okay, you take the fraction and flip it. And multiply it times 12/1. And in this case, a 1/4 inch equals a foot has a 48 scale factor. Okay, so the scale factor of a 1/4 inch equals a foot is 48. What about 1 inch equals a foot? Same thing. 1/1, you take 1, flip it. 1 is a fraction, is 1/1. Times 12/1. equals 12. Because 1 times 12 is 12, 1 times 1 is 1, and 12 over 1 is 12. About 3 inch equals a foot. Same thing, flip it, which becomes 1 over 3 times 12 over 1 gives you 12 over 3, which equals 4. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now, when you get into these type of fractions, it gets a little bit more difficult. Because when you flip 16 over, or 3/16 and you flip it, multiply times 12 over 1. Now, why am I using 12? 12 inches in a foot? There's 12 inches in a foot. Okay? Alright, somebody's going to have to do the math. What's 16 times 12? Becomes 192 over 3, which in turn becomes 64. Okay? Now the scale factor, like I said, determines how big you got to scale your title block up. So you're going to have to know this. So when you put your 8.5 by 11 title block on there, depending on whatever it is, what you get on there, you scale it up by the scale factor. So 1/4 inch, you'll scale it up 48 times. For 3/16 inch equals a foot, you'll scale your title block up 64 times. And I don't mean 64 times you got to sit there and scale. I mean, once you hit scale, you'll type in 64. Okay? But I just wanted to rephrase that. Nobody sits there 64 times and scale. All right. Your LTS is always half the scale factor. So your LTS is half the scale factor. So as you can see, scale factor is the first thing you got to know before you can do anything else. So of course, 1/4 inch equals a foot. You'll set your LTS to 24. 1 inch equals a foot. You'll set your LTS to 6. 3 inch, you'll set it to 2. And for 3/16, you'll set it to 32. And how do you set your LTS? Yep, just type in LTS spacebar and type the number in. Alright. And I'm going to throw one more down here. I'm just going to say metric. I don't want to go through it with you. Scale factor for metric. 25.4. The LTS is 12.7. Now let's figure the text height. When you're setting like your dimension style up, you know in your dimension style, you got to say what the standard text height is, right? 1/8 of an inch. You're going to still do that. Okay? So listen carefully. When I figure this text height, that does not affect your dimension style. You will still put 0.125 in your dimension style as far as the text height. Where it does affect is when you start to create multi-line text or single-line text. Okay? If you want to just create like a note, like y'all have to do on that final exam for CAD, down in that bottom right-hand corner y'all have to, when you go to create that note, and generally for the text size we type in .125, you don't. You'll have to figure out this text to know what to put there. And I'm going to go through and show you all that. So for text, you take the scale factor, multiply times the height of the text you want. In our case, we do most of our stuff 1/8, right? So I'll say 48 times 1/8, and I think is 6. Am I correct on that? 6? Some of them I know by heart, some of them I still have to figure out. Alright, same thing here for 1 inch. You'll take the scale factor, which is 12, multiply times 1/8. I don't know this one. Somebody do that for me. 12 times 1/8. 1.5. So your text height would be 1.5 inches. Two times 1/8. For 3 inch equals a foot would be 4. I mean 4. I'm sorry. 4 times 1/8. .5. Half an inch. 3/16 would be 64 times 1/8. I think it comes up to what, 7.5, something like that? 8. And then for metric, you'll just say 25.4 times 1/8. Comes up to 3.175. Okay? So you can see, once you get to scaling, you got to start doing, because you're going to go out there, and you're going to get this big drawing on there, and you're going to start doing your text, and you ain't going to be able to see it. And you're going to be wondering why. Why? Is because you have to put in these new values for your text type. Okay? So that's the 3 things you're going to have to figure with your new scales. Scale factor first. I generally, once I know my scale factor, the first thing I do is go ahead and set my line type scale so I don't forget. And then I go ahead and figure in my text, that way I'll know what it is when I start doing my drawing. Now, I do want to give you a little hint. Before I scale my drawing up, or my title block here, I always make sure all my text is in my title block first. Because that way, once you scale the title block up, your text is already the correct size. Alright, makes sense? Okay, so make sure you fill that title block and get everything in there, or at least just filled out before you go and scale it up, so you don't have to go in and figure all this up. Now,
So we wouldn't have to do all that if we just did it. But we probably should check.
yeah, I would check.
Okay.
You know, and the reason why is because it's very easy to accidentally scale the wrong size, to accidentally mistype in a number and you don't realize it. So I always kind of check it just to make sure. I'm one that I'd rather be safe in the beginning and print it out at a due date and then figure out something's wrong, and then you really don't have time to fix it. So that's kind of the way I like to do it. I like to check everything up front. Now, so that, like I said, I would go ahead and definitely have all this set up, title block field, scaled it up, and then start drawing my drawing. Now, under your text style, which is Home tab, Annotation panel, Click Annotation, and the letter A with the paintbrush. A lot of people say, well, now that I know what size it is, I'm going to come in here to the text style and go ahead and put the height. You want to leave that height to 0. The reason being is now that you're starting, you're going to be getting into larger objects or larger drawings. We don't just have text an 1/8 of an inch. Okay? You're going to start getting into have to title things and put some headings on different stuff. And those sizes of text start jumping up. It's no longer an 1/8. I mean, the standard size stays an 1/8, but like your titles, your headings. For example, let's say you draw a section here and a section here. When you put the heading under there and say what that section is, it's larger than an 1/8 of an inch. And your dimensions and stuff stay at an 1/8. But when you start putting headings and titles in there, it gets larger. So if you put a size in here, it's not going to let you change the height larger. So you'll be stuck with that size. So I'll leave this at 0. I don't ever put the text height inside there. Where I change it is when I come in here and select multi-line text, start one, and then I come up here and change it. Okay? I don't change it inside the actual text manager. I change it up here when I'm creating the text itself. Alright, so let's see. Dimension style. Home tab, Annotation panel, click on Annotation, click the dimension with the paintbrush on it. The only thing that will change, okay, the only thing that will change from what you've been doing up to this point, you will come to the Fit tab on your dimension style. Right here next to Use Overall Scale Of, you put your scale factor right there. So we're fixing to do a metric drawing, so you will type in 25.4, and it adjusts all your settings for you. You still set everything up exactly the same as you've been doing. That 25.4 will change all your settings for you.
That's all.
That's for metric. If it was that 4 inch equals a foot, you would type in 48 right there. Okay? So your scale factor is what goes in this spot right here. Once you type that in and you hit OK, set current and close, that's it as far as dimension style. But your multi-leader style, you have to go in and do the exact same thing. Home tab, Annotation panel, click Annotation, and you see the leader with the paintbrush. Modified, under leader structure, you'll see specify scale. You have to type in the scale factor of the drawing you are working on. And I'm going to go ahead and warn y'all, depending on the type of drawing you do, there's going to be a lot more changes in it. And we're going to get into that next week when you start having multiple drawings or multiple objects on the same drawing at different scales. It gets tricky. Alright, so once you set that, of course all your other settings you set like they're supposed to be. Hit OK, set current, and close. I do all this up front. I don't go and draw the drawing and then try to worry about setting things up. Because what generally happens, once you draw the drawing, a lot of times you just start dimensioning and don't worry about it setup. I set everything up front, so that way once I draw, and I go to start dimension, it's already ready. I don't want to sit there and waste my time doing that. Because if you do it all up front, you tend to be a little bit more careful and make sure everything's set up properly. If you wait to the end, generally you're rushing to set it up, and you miss things. Let's see, I'm trying to think, is there anything else that can be affected? Dimension style, multi-linear style. Like I said, text, when you do multi-line, what did we say the metric was? 3.175? I think it was.
I can see that.
And you see, if I was to change it 3.175, you probably never saw that text. Okay? So you have to, if you don't see your text, you know you didn't change your,
And you say you don't change the size of the object.
no, never scale the size of the object, always just the title block. Because, let's say now, okay, I scaled my title block up, now I'll start drawing. This is why I like to do my title block, I set my dimensions up, all that up front. Because once you've already scaled the title block, you know you never have to scale anything again, so it doesn't confuse you. Watch. Okay, I have a 104 millimeter object. You see it didn't even go off the page. Okay? If we had typed in 104 on our regular title block, it would have been miles away from your title block. But now that I've scaled the title block up, you just draw the drawing like it's supposed to be. You will be printing in here. That's the other thing to change. Like I said. Alright. So now when I go to plot this thing, I go through the same usual setups that we had before. Letter, window, I create my window, center the plot, uncheck the fit the paper. Well, if you notice, there is no metric on this thing. There's no 1 to 25.4 or anything like that. So to make it metric, what you're going to have to do is you see it says 1 inch to 25.4 units. Okay, 1 inch equals 25.4 units, so that's what you have to change. Now, in future drawings that we're going to do, we'll be dealing with some kind of scale, and you'll just click here and come down and find the architectural scale that you're dealing with. But as far as metric, I lost my cursor.
Right.
Okay, so for metric, you just have to come down here and type in 25.4 units. Now, when I've been grading some of them principles of CAD drawing, a lot of y'all either are not using the scale or you're not printing monochrome. A lot of you keep forgetting to come up here and click in monochrome. That's 3 points off every time you forget to do that. Alright, it's 5 points off for every time you forget to set this scale and you just leave that checked at the paper. So when I write on the drawings print 1 to 1, that means you need to come here and make sure you check 1 to 1, or whatever scale you're actually at. Make sure you hit this monochrome, because if not, it prints out like everything's gray. Okay? But if you run through these same exact setups, you should be, and always preview it. out or sign yes? I want to sign all there. Preview it. If it doesn't look like the handout, then you know you're not doing it right. Okay? Now, I noticed a lot of you when I kind of walk around and watch you, if you're printing something and that's exactly what you want to print, but something's missing or something looks like it's messed up, it's not nothing to do with your plot, it's just you noticed you did something wrong when you're drawing. Exit out of here and hit apply to layout. If you click that, it always keeps your plot setting, so you don't have to keep going back in and set it up on this same exact drawing each time. I think I watched, I don't remember who it was printing the other day, and something kept doing it when you kept going, yeah, Leah. I think it was like 4 times you guys kept going back in. If y'all just hit apply to layout, it keeps the settings. So watch, if I get out of here, even though I didn't print, and I come back in and hit apply, everything, okay, it didn't do that. Get out, come back, try it again. Everything should be the same. Okay? And that's not only now, but let's say next week you want to come back in here and print, it'll still be set up then too, because it saves it inside your actual drawing file. Now, the only time it does mess up is if, let's say you're going to print this at home, then of course it's not going to recognize the printer name that was there, so you got to set everything back up. Alright, and what I try to tell students, do this. Until you get used to this, create a checklist. And I'll go ahead and run down the checklist with you. Okay. When I open up a new drawing, and this is going to be scale. Alright? The first thing I do, of course, is figure the scale factor. Next thing I do is go ahead and figure the tag type, because you know you're going to need it eventually. Then I set my line type scale. Then I set my dimension style. Then I set my multi-leader style up. And generally, once you do that, it kind of takes care of your text style, so you don't really have to go into text style. Because remember, for me at least, when you set up your dim style, you actually have to create that separate text style. That's something else I saw a lot of you didn't do. When you're inside your dimension style, you cannot use standard as your text. You have to set up that dim text style with that 0.65 width factor where I take off points. So once you're in your dimension style, you should actually be setting up your text style at the same time, so that's why you don't really have to go out and do that. Alright, now once I set my multi-leader style up, I draw my title block. I fill out the title block. Then I scale the title block. Now, there's one piece of that I probably need to tell you. Probably what was the first thing I told you? Scale factor, text height, set line type scale. Alright, after a set line type scale, when you're on a drawing different, let's just say when you're on an architectural drawing and you're going to be using architectural units, this is where I generally set that up. Right before the line type scale, before I set the line type scale, I'll set my units. So you might want to write that in there just for future, because when we get to architectural, you got to do that. You have to set your units to architectural in the future, but for now, you won't have to do it. Your units will stay destined. But you can go ahead and write it down, because I usually go to units too and set my precision exactly how I want it. As far as, remember, units does not set the precision of your dimension style. It just sets the precision of when you're checking yourself and you're doing a distance, pulling the distance and that kind of stuff. It's how many numbers it's going to show you. Your precision for your dimension style is set up inside your dimension style. But if you follow that checklist, you shouldn't miss anything. Okay? Because you're going through all your settings up front so that when you go ahead and start drawing, you're just drawing. You get into the zone. Believe it or not, that's why most things are missed. Is when you're drawing your object, you're in that zone, and once you have to finish it, it's hard to get back and get your mind into all the other sections. Let's see. I'm pretty sure that's about it. The plotting was the only other thing we need to do. So, what drawing will you have to do? That's going to test your understanding. I guess I'm doing the right thing. Oh! No, it's not there. Hey, I'll give me 1 second. Let me go off. Anybody in here wasn't in principal? I think all you were in principal with Cat, right? Or so everybody's not funny. That's the problem. Hold on, let me go for it.
Yeah, and then we got high school job.
I have a question for you. You got unloaded one shotgun, shotgun that. Didn't say to me about that. No. I just had some out in the oh, as long as any weapons, as long as it's you had it, unless it's hidden.
Shit.
I'll just sit and use this and that is now that now then it's just one.
In Mississippi, no, you can have a low neck chamber,
See, I was
there are some states, I think Alabama, you can't,
you gotta have
if it's visible, you can have it loaded. But if it's hidden, you have to have the magazine and the weapon separate. Whereas in Louisiana, it's the opposite. If it is, it can't be, if it's visible, it has to be unloaded. And if it's hidden, you can have it out. They don't get you with the other ones. I just think it'll get you in trouble in Mississippi with property. Is if you're on state property, national forest, federal reserve, you protect the areas. Shooting squirrels back in the house.
Yeah, I just
In campuses.
Alright,
yeah, you're not here to have it.
go to the website, assignment number 1, gear arm. That's gonna be it right there.
Fantastic.
What I just circled? That one right there.
Oh, okay, I was like, I thought it was all of them.
Alright? The one you drew in fundamentals. But you now going to draw it in principles. It's a little bit different because you got to set all these standards up and set all the settings and all that. You will center. You will layer. You will dimension. Now, when you do your scale or your, in your title block, you write scale, just write metric. Scale, metric. You won't write 1-to-1, you'll write scale, metric. Okay? Your title will be gear arm. And for your figure or problem number or exercise number, just write handout. You don't have to write the one that's on there, you can just write handout. Okay?
Will it work out if we do our considering when we
Considering-
We gotta make this one a huge title block.
Yeah, you got to scale this title block up or it'll never fit on your 8.5 by 11 title block. So you got to draw your title block, fill it in with your text, and scale it up 25.4. And then once your title block's scaled up, then you start drawing the object. There's an intermediate layer thing you need to follow now. I think they just have a couple more layers on there that you're gonna have to follow. I think I changed some. I just have to look at it.
So it's, you got it all changed. You got that all changed.
Yeah, it's on there. It should be layers. It's under layers under here.
I mean, what's the name of the system? Yeah, it was
Nope. You're an intermediate CAD.
associated.
Intermediate CAD. Any questions about what's done? This will be due Monday next week. I will tell you, there won't be any tests in here. We'll have no written test. This class will be strictly your knowledge of being able to draw and set things up. Okay? Next week, we're going to still deal with scaling, except we're going to get into scaling, putting two different scales on one drawing. When you get into doing that, you got to start creating more than one dimension style. You got to start creating more than one multi-leader style. It's going to get a little more hairy. And then the week after that, spring break. And then the week you come back from that, I'm going to show you what we call paper space, which will make your world 100 times more easy than what you're going to do the next week.
Oh, well, why would we make it easy now?
The reason not, because I was working for a company, structural civil engineer I used to work for. We did everything in paper space, the easy way. But anytime we dealt with this one client, and he was a big client for us, big, he would not allow us to draw on paper. We had to do it the way you're fixing to learn it. Okay? So you have to still know both ways. Even though we don't spend a whole lot of time on this first way, you still have to know it. You have to have seen it. Okay? And like I said, for us, it was 100 times easier to draw a paper space, but for him, it was old school. He didn't want to have to sit there and deal with paper space. And when he's paying the bills, you're going to do what he said, as much as we didn't like it. And we actually had a woman that called him out on it in a meeting one day with him, and our boss fired her on the spot. I mean, she got in almost a shouting match with him. And he just told her after he left, he said, we had to pack the office up, you're gone. He said, because he is who's paying us. Okay, so, you bow down to your clients. I'll just go ahead and tell you that.
I was in customer service for 30
Yeah.
years, 20 years, 25 years before I went back to school.
Even if you're right, you're wrong.
Yep.
I'll just go ahead and tell you that when you're dealing with clients. When they're writing the check, you're wrong no matter what. But like for instance, I designed a $500,000 house in this company. I tried to tell them about 5 times they couldn't afford it, that it was going to be over their budget. They kept wanting. I kept telling them, so I finally said, I'll do whatever you want. Well, I designed the house, got it all ready for them, put it out for construction. The contractor had to almost redesign the house because they couldn't afford it. All these big high roofs they wanted, and these fancy roofs and all this. I went and took a picture of it after it was all said and done, and there was a big reduction of what I designed. You know, you can tell a client once, and you tell them politely, but if they don't want to listen, you just do it bad.
Eventually deal with the headaches afterwards.
All right, any questions? This shouldn't take you long. This is probably as easy as something, easier than a lot of them other drawings.
It's just gonna be that scale.
Just figuring out how to scale and set up your dimensions.
We don't pretty much know that scale.
Yeah. All right, you're free to go. See you next week.
No class Wednesday?
Wednesday's just an open lab.
Oh, okay.
Since we're not doing tests, your Wednesday is strictly open lab.
Okay.
And how is BIS work? Will it give you like claims that?
Yeah. You might as well get ready to work. It won't be that bad. I think they sent us the wrong book. And I still think it's, I think it's only like 10 modules anyway. So, yeah.